Good evening and welcome to AdminChat. I am absolutely delighted that this evening we have one of my dearest friends, Bonnie Low-Kramen, here to interview about her career and her life within the administrative profession. I'm really lucky that we're here in Orlando at Admin Pro Forum, where I've managed to grab her for half to three quarters to talk about everything administrative and about her life a little bit. So can we please welcome Bonnie Low-Kramen?
Thanks, Lucy. Oh my gosh, what a treat.
It's going to be wonderful. There's so much I want to ask you. And it's so rare for people to actually get to know you a bit.
Oh, well, it's such a treat, and I have no idea what your questions are going to be, so I trust you completely. Whatever.
Shall we start with a bit of background? I mean, I know that you were born in New Jersey and you're really proud of that.
Yeah.
But what did your parents do? What was your background?
Yeah. Mom was a legal secretary.
Was she?
And Dad was the chief accountant at the Jersey City Post Office. So I joke that I come by my obsession with office supplies by DNA. You know, I just loved all the tools that they used. You know, Mom was constantly about pens and pencils, and there was always tons of it. And Dad was a big guy. Dad was 6'3" and over 300 pounds, but man, he could type like the wind. You know, and he would bring me to the office. And I remember playing on the typewriter and meeting his secretary and really enjoying that. You know, I love the smell of offices. I don't know, it's just a little weird. You know how Vicky always jokes that she's a data junkie, and I think I really enjoyed offices from the very beginning. And my parents, I am one of two daughters.
Yes.
Jen is my sister, and I went to college, and it was always an expectation that I was going to go to college and that I could do whatever I wanted to do with my career. And you know, they gave me that freedom. They believed that I could do whatever I wanted to do.
How wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So what were your hobbies and things as a kid? Because I know you were passionate about theatre.
Yeah, well, first I was a TV junkie.
Okay.
I was a television junkie, and there's a little not so great part of this story, and that is that I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism when I was little. And that meant that I spent a lot of time alone. And, being the only Jewish kid and feeling kind of like an alien is the absolute truth of it, and I don't mind sharing it with this audience. That feeling of being left out, I'm pretty sure every person knows. Do you know that feeling?
Yes. Yes, because I was the really geeky kid. And I went to a very top girls' school and was bullied very badly at school because I was the one with the glasses and the funny teeth and the long hair and sat in a corner and worked hard.
That's why I'm super sensitive to anybody who feels left out. So what that made me do is I spent a lot of time alone, and that meant I was into television. That's what I chose to do, and I found that I really was fascinated by what I guess I learned was show business. And I was studying actors and shows and movies and that kind of thing. Loved when Mom and Dad would take me to movies. And then we started going to theater. And wow, I know we share that love. Was amazing. I remember seeing Pippin on Broadway.
Yes.
And
wow.
And just knowing I wanted to be part of that. I didn't exactly know how it was going to work in my life. I just knew I wanted to be around show business. It was all instinct. And my parents didn't quite know what to do with it, but I would audition, I sang. I kind of just stumbled about and fell in. But so theater was my knowing about television and theater were my hobbies. I loved to read and I loved to write. I was a writer from really early age. I wrote poetry and I wrote stories, and I really do think that was foreshadowing for later because I identify as a writer.
Yes, well, I would identify you as a writer as well. Your writing is excellent, and that's, of course, how we first met when you first wrote for me. So,
yes,
and we'll come on to that a little bit later. So, did you study theatre?
I did. I did. I was at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and I was a theater and English major. They had this double major thing, which made my parents happier that I had the English part, but then they were like, what are you going to do with that? Mom always had the fear how are you going to make a living at this?
Yes.
So I was an actor. And as part of the theater major, though, at Rutgers meant that you had to do tech. You had to go strike sets.
Okay.
They made you do that. So you couldn't just be an actor. You had to understand backstage. You had to understand. They wanted you to get a taste of stage management and wardrobe and lighting, all that good stuff. So, I think I still have my tools. They made you buy the hammer. They gave you that list. You had to have your own hammer and screwdriver, whatever, to crash striking. Of course, you know what that means. After a show comes down, we had to strike it. And all through that experience, I was an okay actor, was the truth of it. But what I really was drawn towards was the kind of the organization of it all. How did this all happen? How did the tickets happen? How did those people end up in the seats? So I started as an actor, but I think in a piece of my head always was thinking, I'm going to be around show business, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be on the stage.
And that brings us nicely to, how did you become an assistant?
Oh my gosh. Well, right. My career began selling tickets.
Okay.
I was with my husband at the time, who became my ex-husband many years later, but we were in Chicago. We lived in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois. And my first job out of college, let me say this, that I tried being an actor. And in those days, Actors Equity was the union.
Yes.
And they had what they called the hotline. So we non-equity actors, if you weren't a member of the union, you would call and you'd find out where the non-equity auditions were. This is a really important story. So I was trying my best to be an actor. Well, I moved to Chicago in January, and it was the snowiest winter they'd ever had. So I found out from the hotline that there was an audition one day in downtown Chicago. So off I drove to downtown Chicago, and it took me at least an hour to drive around one city block. It was so awful. And I was crying and I was upset. And I finally got to the audition 2 hours late. And I thought, well, I'm here, so let me try. And they let me sing my song for 15 seconds. And I can't even remember what I prepared. And I remember walking out of that audition and thinking, you know what? This is all right. I'm going to drive back to the dinner theater that's in the town near where I live, and I'm going to apply for any job that they have available, not acting. I'm just going to be around the theater. And the job they had available was in the box office selling tickets. So they hired me at $4.25 an hour. And my boss was Zita, and she was a very strong woman. And I have a history of working for very strong women and hanging out with strong women, which I love. And I'm thinking in my head, this is awesome. Zita's been working for 16 years at this theater. I'm going to learn so much from Zita. I'm going to learn everything about the theater. And that was my plan. 3 weeks in, Zita came to me and said, so Bonnie, I'm quitting and I'm making you the manager.
Oh my word.
Yeah. And she gave me a raise to $4.50 an hour. And so in a matter of seconds, I was made a manager. And now all of a sudden I had 5 people to supervise and schedule and deal with their complaints and deal with whatever. And I was a terrible manager. That's when I learned, Lucy, that leaders are made and not born.
Yes.
Just because I was now called a manager did not make me one. And that lesson has really bode me well in now what I'm doing. Because I get that. Just because they call you one doesn't make you one, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that you get to tell people what to do, which I think is what we think when we first get made a manager, isn't it?
I look back and I was a terrible manager, and I learned, but nobody trained me. Zita gave me a little bit of guidance, but then she was checked out. She was out of there. Mm-hmm. And off I went. And I lost people, had to rehire people. I had to go in when people wouldn't show up. I had to deal with, at 21 years old, I'm dealing with this stuff. So that is an important story as part of my journey. I ended up in box office after box office as we moved from Illinois to get away from the snow. We then moved to Atlanta, which was
Okay.
better. And I worked in a box office there at the Alliance Theater. And then because of Mark's job, we moved to Texas, Houston, and I worked at the Alley Theater there in the box office. So box offices are awesome because in most theaters, that's where everybody comes. The producers, the directors, the actors. Like, I loved being in the middle of all of that and getting to know these people. And then when we moved back to New Jersey, a colleague from Texas met me for a drink one night on 42nd Street.
Very nice.
Yeah, because I'm from Jersey, I moved back to New Jersey, and a colleague, we got together, and that's how these stories happen. These things happen. So Scott was there with my friend Jeffrey. Jeffrey was my buddy, and he brought Scott with him, and I didn't know Scott was going to come. Scott was the marketing director at the Whole Theater in Montclair, New Jersey, which is where Olympia Dukakis was the producing artistic director.
Okay.
And he needed a head of publicity. So he said, "Do you write?" And I said, "Yes, I write. I do that. Do you know about theater?" "Absolutely." So we hit it off over a cocktail, as happens. That, that's the golf course for us, I guess, is a cocktail. And I applied, and no one was going to get hired at the theater until Olympia met them. That was her rule. So I went in one night. I remember it was an evening meeting, and she was sitting on top of a Xerox machine in ripped jeans and a T-shirt, and she just looked so open and so beautiful. And she jumped off the Xerox machine. She shook my hand nice and strong, and we talked for like a half an hour, and she said, "All right, you're hired." I remember liking her so much, and I trusted her somehow. We just talked about our backgrounds. She was not famous. She was not famous when I met Olympia Dukakis. It was 10 months later that in our work together, my job was to put bodies in the seats. We were doing Shakespeare. We were doing Tennessee Williams. We were doing, Atul Fugard. She was really doing some edgy stuff. And my job was to put bodies in those seats. And so she and I got to work really closely together. Like I would have to kind of interview her like this. And, how do we want to approach that show? And who should we target and that kind of thing. And 10 months into the work together, she came to me one day and said, "All right, here's the deal. I've been cast in a movie. We're shooting it in Canada. And you and I have a ton of work to do before I go." And that movie was Moonstruck.
Wow.
That movie was Moonstruck. And while she was gone, we had a staff of 20 people. And she couldn't have 20 people calling her every day. So that we decided as a team that she needed one person who she trusted, who could kind of be communication central. So everybody would come to me and tell me what they needed from her, what decision they needed, what was going on. And I would keep my list on my notepad, and that was when I kind of got that concept of administrative triage, because it seemed like, Apollo's issue seems more pressing than somebody else's, and so I started like numbering them, etc. When she was in Canada, I would get my 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day when she would call me on the phone. And Lucy, what I didn't know is that me doing this was me turning into her assistant. I just wasn't called it that.
Yes.
She had a need. And that's what the world is. It's about needs.
Yep.
Olympia had a need. She needed someone she trusted to be the hub so that the work could continue, but that she couldn't be on the phone as long. And then she needed someone that she trusted to go to her house and check the answering machine. Again, a need. She couldn't be there, and she knew I knew enough about her life to be able to fill in the gaps, and that I knew most of the players, so if I could listen to, a board member for the theater and understand what they wanted, that kind of thing. And nobody trains you for this.
No.
to decide how that's going to be approached. But I realized I loved it. I just loved it. And Olympia was up there a month. So on any given day, I would take that notebook with me everywhere, and the phone call would come, and this was before cell phones, which was nuts. And I would get her on the phone, and then we'd be talking, and I'd say, okay, we need this, and then I'd hear, Ms. Dukakis, we need you on the set. And she'd say, okay, Bonnie, bye. Every assistant on the planet understands what that means.
Yep. Yep. And it's about prioritization, isn't it? It's making sure that the things that you're talking to her about are the most important, rather than just having a huge list and working your way through it.
Exactly.
So when did it change into being you officially being her assistant?
Yeah. Whew. Okay, the fates. It's, these stories are so much about luck, being in the right place at the right time, the right background. The Oscar buzz on Moonstruck was almost immediate. We had Cher, we had Nick Cage, we had Norman Jewison as the director, we had MGM as the studio. I mean, this was ginormous. This was huge. And Olympia very quickly understood, she was not famous at the time, but Norman Jewison said to her, you need to do every piece of press that comes along because I think you're going to get nominated. And I think you're going to win. If you want to win, you need to do every piece of press. I was doing publicity. Lucy, that meant me. That meant I handled every one of those phone calls about the Oscar press, but it also meant because her first cousin, Michael Dukakis, was running for president that year. It was 1988. She's very close with Michael, and she wanted to help him run for president. That meant that she was agreeing to do a lot of political press also. So on any given day, she was doing 3 interviews for the Oscars, 3 interviews with political press. And that was taking up so much of my time.
And you were pregnant.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's Adam. I was pregnant. Adam was born March 20th. The Oscars were April 4th, I think. And then a few months later was the election for the presidency. All of that was testing ground. I was still doing my job at the theater, but after that experience, after we lived through the election, then the fates aligned, and the governor of New Jersey cut all the arts budgets in the state by 40%. What that meant was that Olympia had 2 choices. She could fire all the staff and hire entry-level staff at much less salaries because there were fixed costs that couldn't change, or she could close the theater. And I knew that it was real the day I saw her get an empty box and start packing her office. And that was the day I went home to my typewriter and typed out a proposal for her, because by this time she'd gotten cast in Steel Magnolias. That was the movie she followed Moonstruck up with. She was so famous. She was being asked to host Saturday Night Live. She was on, late night talk shows. And all of those things were coming through me. And the beauty of this was I found out I was good at it. I was... all of this activity, whether it was, the Oscars, the presidential campaign, I was like, all right, I can do this. And I did it, and I was now talking with agents and managers and producers. It was so crazy.
Which was quite a difference to how you started out, because I can remember you telling a story where she said, when's the tall one going to speak?
Oh, gosh, yes. I had quite a journey. Olympia, you know what changed? The needs. At first, when I graduated college and I started working for Olympia, in your 20s, you're unsure of yourself.
Yes.
I think most women are, but bless her. She saw something in me that even I didn't see, Lucy. That's an absolute true statement. And she encouraged me. She was like, so Bonnie, what do you think of that? What's your opinion on that? I hired you because I wanted to know what you think. And I felt like, okay, I'll tell you. And then sometimes she would say, that's it. That's perfect. That's exactly how we're going to work that out. that builds confidence.
And she had utter faith in you. I know you have a story that when you were managing that whole process with the Oscars and the presidential election, you were going and doing interviews and things, and you were writing things on cards.
Oh yeah, right. And we were very low tech. And, using the computer, we finally had a computer to write her schedule on 5x7 cards. And she took that information to the bank. I knew that information had to be perfect. And so even in front of Michael Dukakis, who's questioning whether that card was right one day, she said, Michael, if I'm going to start that again, just take a pause.
Maybe we start that whole bit again.
Okay,
because I
go ahead.
Screwed up on
Yeah, go ahead. Robert, are you okay?
How are you for battery and things?
You got 8 minutes.
Okay. So let's do this story and then let's stop.
Okay.
Okay. So
you were saying she has utter faith, or?
Yes, I was. But by this stage, she obviously had utter faith in you, because I know when you go back to the stories about the presidential election and about her running for the Oscars, that there were times where she would take the information that you gave her to the bank.
Yeah. And I instinctively knew that everything I gave her had to be letter perfect. The terror is that some of this information is going to be wrong, and then what's going to happen? She's going to go to the wrong spot. Like, the schedule was so tight. That's what most people don't understand about famous people, is that their scheduling is so tightly scheduled, like all we get is 24 hours in a day, that it had to be right. And so one day in front of Michael Dukakis, who's questioning whether the card I had given her, the 5x7 card with her schedule, was correct, she looked at him and said, Michael, if Bonnie says we have to be at CBS at 2 o'clock, we have to be at CBS at 2 o'clock. and I was right. I was double checking and triple checking because there was too much at stake. Like, everything was, down to the minute, really. Hair and makeup had to start at 2 o'clock in order for her to be, in wardrobe at 3 o'clock. Bum. And the world doesn't get that about famous people. They just see them on the magazine covers and think that just happens by magic, and it so doesn't. There's a team of people, as you know, working behind the scenes to get, Angelina Jolie on that cover. It's an army.
Yes. What were the most important lessons that you learned from Olympia?
Oh my gosh. Oh, so many. I quote her all the time. She's amazing. You know what she said, Lucy? This is not a rehearsal. And, life. That she was always aware that to keep things in perspective, to not settle. And as a woman, she was a proud feminist, and she had to fight in Massachusetts for who she was. She experienced some ethnic bias herself, being Greek, a Greek American. And so we bonded in that way, that I got her. I understood her passion and her, she refused to change her name. Her agents told her, oh, you shouldn't be Olympia Dukakis, that's too ethnic. And she was like, no, what I saw her do, Lucy, at every turn was to claim who she was and to be honest about it. In staff meetings, she wanted to understand who the people were in the room. She showed respect for everyone. And what I saw as a response from everybody else was unbelievable respect and dedication to her. So it didn't matter. The more and more famous she got, she did not treat people differently. And that was a huge lesson to see in front of my eyes. And then the thing we talk about all the time in the presentations is that whole elephant in the room thing,
Yes.
I got to see time and time again what happened at a table of people when there was an issue that there was an elephant in the room that we knew it was a difficult thing. Somebody had to get fired. Something couldn't happen because of money, whatever, a hard thing to say. And I got to see what happened when Olympia was the one to say the hard thing. Again and again, I got to watch what happened. And what happened was once she said it, everyone else just did.
Oh, thank goodness. Yes.
And I was like, that's it. Why are we wasting so much time and energy on these elephants in the room? And that's why I talk so much about it, because I see that people benefit from, it might be hard. We've had hard conversations over the years, right?
Yes.
And it's like, we so value this relationship, but but sometimes it gets tested, right? Like, you can't be human and have it not be tested. So I think that was such a gift to get from her. The idea of how it's not easy, but these relationships are worth fighting for, and sometimes you do have to say the hard thing.
And it's such a theme of everything you do, speaking up and finding your voice. So bearing all that in mind, it must have been hugely difficult to make the decision to leave.
Oh gosh, yes. Wrenching is the word I used, traumatic. However, there was something that was happening towards like my 23rd year. I ended up staying for 25 years, but probably at year 23, I started, what was happening is that my book had come out in 2004.
Tell us a bit about that, and then we'll come back.
Well, there I was working out of Olympia's, one of the bedrooms in her home in Montclair, New Jersey. And I was a one-person show. And I was so aware of the lack of resources for my work. I went to Barnes & Noble one day to find a book about this work. I was like, there has to be a book out there that tells me how to do this work well. Because I was winging it. Yeah. And every assistant on the planet can relate to that too.
Yes.
The winging it every single day. But I was like, wait a minute. There are a lot of assistants in the world. There are a lot of, in corporate land and in personal life. And there I was doing this for a movie star. And I thought, how do I do this well? And at Barnes & Noble, I passed the miles of cookbooks down to the management section. And there were like this many books. Tiny amount, and they had very little to do with what I was doing in my work. And I stood there in Barnes & Noble and said, I think I have to write the damn thing myself.
Yes.
And so I did. That was 2002. It took 2 years. I wrote it between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. daily because that was when Adam was sleeping.
And it's now one of the best-selling books in the world for assistants.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm so gratified by that, because anybody who tells you they want to write a book, it's hard. It's really, really hard to do. And my goal was to pretty much put everything I knew about it, because by this time I was hearing from a lot of assistants, because now we had the internet and now we had email, and that enabled me to hear from assistants from all over the country, which was blowing my mind. And somehow they were finding me, and I was giving advice and finding, wow, I had the answer. Like all of this was stumbling around, and I used my colleagues to help me fill out the book with stories, because instinctively I knew that firsthand experiences and stories would be a powerful way to share what this animal of a job is.
And by that stage, were you running New York Celebrity Assistants as well?
So New York Celebrity Assistants began in 1996.
Okay.
So all of this, like the stars were aligning, and that was a revelation, to finally meet other people who did what I did, who worked for other celebrities. So on our first board were people like the assistants to Morgan Freeman and Caroline Kennedy and Tommy Tune and, so Marlo Thomas. Great people. Harry Belafonte's assistant also. We had a great time, and we gathered, and it was a revelation to meet others who did this work. And they helped me with the book. They agreed to be interviewed.
So what was the vision when you left?
Okay. So I left in 2011. Been thinking about it since 2009, and the vision was that I was getting invited to speak and teach all over. And for those few years before, I was doing it part-time. I was doing it on vacation days and on weekends, and I was trying to make it all fit and be a mom and be a wife, and I was exhausted. I was totally exhausted, and I had to do some real soul searching. My partner, Robert, who we know and love, Robert Sanders, thank you, Robert, and my son, Adam Kramen, they both helped me process this, and what would it be? Like, I had never imagined before 2009 that I would ever leave Olympia. And then I started thinking, I was becoming more excited about the speaking and teaching and writing than I was about my work anymore. So I think all jobs end sometime.
Yeah.
And it was a gradual process, but as I started thinking about what did that look like, in my head I was thinking, well, I'm not leaving unless she's in great hands.
Yes.
I'm not going anywhere unless Olympia Dukakis and Louis Zorich have someone wonderful to take care of them. And Patrick Healy walked into our lives, and
the stars aligned again.
Yeah. And I was free to go, and Olympia was pleased. She was shocked for a few seconds, and then she got it. Because by this time, I had shown her some of the emails, and the book was selling, and she wrote the foreword. And, when she read the final draft of the book, Lucy, that's one of the, she was so supportive of me. She read the final draft of the book and called me a couple of days later and said, Bonds, which is what she called me, you really have something here. Don't change a word.
Yeah, she must be so proud of you.
Well, yes. And this last weekend, we were in New York for BTUA, and she and Patrick came.
Wow, how amazing.
And it was the second time they'd come.
Yes.
They'd come before. She's 87 years old now.
Yeah, she is just extraordinary, though.
She is proud of me, and I carry her everywhere. Like she's sitting right here. She's of me. You can't be with someone like that for 25 years and not internalize them.
No.
She's of me.
So, tell me about BTUA then, because that's a force of nature on its own.
Okay, so the book came out, and then I started thinking, well, where are the classes for me? Where can I learn how to do this better? And when I found, again, next to nothing back in those days, to nothing, I'm like, wait a minute. This is huge. There are now 10 million assistants in the world. Why are there so few resources for us? And part of that reason is because we're mostly women, is what I think. That's my theory.
Yes, 98%, isn't it?
95 to 98% of this profession are female. And so I'm like, all right, we got to change this. And, there I worked for one of the strongest feminists. And so I got tired of complaining about the lack of resources. So that's why I wrote the book. And then when about classes, I thought, well, let me give it a shot. Let me dream. What's it going to take? A few pieces of paper. Let me put some ideas down on what would a class look like? I put myself in the seat of the student. What would I want to learn? If I were her or him, what would I want to learn? And actually, there's an extended education thing in New York City called the Learning Annex. Mm-hmm. And the Learning Annex actually asked me to teach several, I probably did maybe a dozen of them, 3-hour evening classes. Mm-hmm. And some of those people actually went on to be celebrity assistants, which I'm very proud of. Anyway, that 3-hour class ended up being kind of the guts for this class, Be the Ultimate Assistant. The title of the class came to me very quickly. Mm-hmm. I knew that's what it had to be the Ultimate Assistant. I got that. And then I started framing out what the class would look like. And really fast, I knew that it had to have a technology piece.
I was going to ask you how you met Vicky Sokolevans.
As I started crafting it, and yes, I need, to talk about how the profession is proceeding, blah, blah, blah. And then, Robert Sanders is from Hewlett-Packard for 36 years. So I live with a techie. And what I was aware of after email started, like my first computer was 1996, and I was on AOL, and I don't know what you were on.
Yes, I was on AOL.
You were on AOL too. And it seemed like every day there were computer questions. And I mean, there were a couple of things that I feel like I saw the train coming down the track. I mean, I know you've got stories of your own in your own life where you knew what was going to be needed. You knew, you saw it. You saw the future, basically.
Definitely.
And what I knew at the time, Robert would probably laugh at this, but I knew the importance of technology. I knew that that was going to explode and that every assistant on the planet was going to need it. I knew it, as sure as I'm sitting here. And so I thought, well, wait a minute, I can't teach it. And Robert's not a teacher, so he wasn't going to teach it. But a colleague at New York Celebrity Assistants had told Vicki Evans, they had worked together, and told Vicki to call me. So we have over these years tried to find if it was an email at first or a phone call. We haven't been able to find the absolute first connection, but she likes to tell people that I didn't say no. You know, that when I remember that, I do remember speaking to her on the phone, just not sure if an email came before, but all I had to do was hear that she was certified in Microsoft Office and that she was an expert in Word and Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook, and which I was not. I was new to it all. And when I started thinking about the class, I called her and I said, I have an idea. And I said, this is the class I'm thinking about it, really baby stages. And could you teach me to teach the technology stuff? And she got kind of angry on the phone and she said, well, how about I teach it? And I said, no, Vicki, you're not understanding. I want to take my idea is that I want to take this class to New York, but not only New York. I want to go to Chicago. I want to go to LA. I want to take this material to the assistant. And you live in Texas and you've got 2 little kids, so like you can't possibly go, right? And she said, yes, I want to go. I'm like, really? I couldn't believe it. And she said, yes, I want to do it. So I said, well, all right, I want to begin in New York. And so we started talking like nuts and bolts, started talking about, these are kind of the dates that I was thinking about. And I don't have a place yet. And, you know, it was just all baby stages. And I liked her. I liked her a lot.
Yes.
I just could tell. My instinct was, you know, Vic, let's give this a try. You know, let's try one. Right? Like
yes.
That's how things start, don't they?
And look,
let's try one.
Look at where we are. You
know?
We
just finished number 33.
Amazing.
She's done every single one.
One of the things I love so much about BTUA is that it's so much about them. I mean, yes, you are the one who is there training and teaching, but actually you're not a traditional teacher at all. And a lot of the training is, no, but I mean, you're so passionate about them and getting them to share their knowledge and their stories. And it's a really life-changing, magical couple of days, I think. I've done several for you now, I think 5 or 6, where I've come and guested. And it really is one of my very favourite training courses to attend. And it's different every time because it's so much about them.
Right. Well, that's what changes. And that's why we have students coming back 3, 4, 5 times. It blows my mind. But it's because of the people in the room. The assistants of this world are some of the brightest, most resourceful, intelligent people on the planet. And you know what Louis Zorich used to say to me, as you know, over the years, over those 25 years, we bought not 1 but 2 houses in a foreign country. We, you know, my goodness, we did so much. We renovated a whole apartment in New York City. And as we would roll from one huge project to another, he would say to me, you know, Bonnie, you could run a whole company. You could run a whole company. And he would say that again and again. And so when it came time to creating this class for assistants, I remembered that these women, mostly women, but some men, we want more men, but there aren't that many right now. They're so capable. It had to be about them because they're all so different and so interesting. So our first class in New York was only, I think, 9 people? 10 people? It was bitty. But Vicki and I, our attitude was that we have to start somewhere, right? We have to start somewhere. And in that class, like, I followed my instincts, and the elements of that first class are still present. I speak with every student before they come.
I know, and that's extraordinary. I mean, you set it up so
important.
that it is personal one-to-one contact and mentorship and whatever, and you speak to them on the phone for quite a period of time.
Yeah.
So that by the time we sit down in the class, you know what
I
you're
know
needing.
them.
Yeah.
The class is so intense. It's such a tight 2 days. I can't afford to figure out who they are when they come to the room. That's too late.
Yes.
Because what I understand is that everybody's coming for a different reason. So the only way for me to find out what that reason is if I talk to them. And so people have said to me, oh, Bonnie, it's not really cost effective for you to do that. You should really do a group call and talk to everybody as a group. And I'm like,
it seems to be working okay to me.
yeah. Well, but no, it's the one-on-one. Assistants are so bright, but they're also, and it's getting better, but there's still an enormous group of oftentimes disrespected people. They've been disrespected and not heard and not fully utilized, and that phone call helps me zero in on the issues in play. And that's what's given me so much material for workplace bullying. That's what's giving me, they're running companies, these women and men, and yet they're severely underpaid. All I have to do is ask the question, do you feel like you're fairly compensated for the role you're doing? I mean, they don't have to name numbers. Just tell me. And then I hear the pain in their voice before they even tell me the full situation. I think that's what makes BTUA different are those phone calls, and I give them the DISC assessment, which also helps me understand their personality types.
But I think it's also the fact that by the time you get them there, they trust you. It's not that you're walking in cold and that they don't know what they're going to get. One of my favourite parts of BTUA is them doing their 2-minute lessons, where you get them to stand up and talk about something that they are passionate about. Give me a couple that really stick out for you, because there have been so many that I've seen that I've just thought, that blew me away.
Yeah, one that comes to mind immediately, it's one of Vicki's favorites too, is Joy Hannon from England.
Oh, yes. Joy's extraordinary.
And she wears a hearing aid, but to speak with Joy and to look at Joy, you don't know that she's hard of hearing, severely hard of hearing. Her 2-minute lesson was about helping our students understand about physical limitations in the workplace, and that just because you can't see someone who's with a cane or a wheelchair, she heightened our awareness to physical disabilities or limitations, including being hard of hearing. And she told the class, you'll notice that I needed to sit in a certain spot, and she so compassionately shared information that all of us in the room might not think enough about, about that sometimes physical limitations are not visible.
I'm going to switch tack very slightly.
Yeah.
I know that one of the real things that you're passionate about and that you're out there banging the drum about is workplace bullying, and you mentioned it a moment ago.
Yep.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, my gosh, yes. Well, you have been responsible for me traveling to 12 countries, pretty much. And I've traveled the United States. And at this point, I have talked with thousands of assistants. And for whatever reason, I have been honored with their stories. So many of them have shared truly jaw-dropping stories. I mean, I'll never forget the gala dinner in London, where I'm standing there with you and F. Lloyd, And you both told me at the same time that you both had experienced severe workplace bullying. And over time, over all these years, I've become absolutely certain that this has been a global epidemic. So I've been talking about this from early on. It's in my book. I have a chapter called The Dark Side of this profession. And somehow some leaders and managers are getting a message that to lead someone by intimidation and humiliation is a smart strategy. And so over these years, I have psychologists who are friends of mine who I get to pick their brain and like, help me understand what this is. I know Dr. Laura Crawshaw, who is one of the world's experts on workplace bullying. Like, what is going on here? Because, Lucy, what I see is that these are amazing assistants who are trying so hard to do excellent work, and they're being slowed down and stopped dead in their tracks and being chased away from companies, from good jobs. They're making good salaries, but they are so being abused and battered emotionally and mentally every day that it's sending them running for a new job, and sometimes at lesser salaries. And like, I see it all connected. The wage gap is connected with bullying, and honestly, it's women are feeling so stuck in certain jobs that they don't have a cushion. They don't feel that they can move. A lot of these women are single moms, and they feel trapped, and I don't want them to feel trapped. So I see that if we can, you, bless you, you give me the opportunity on stage at ExecSec Live to be open, to break the silence about some of these, what I call burning issues in the workplace.
I think it was one of the very first times in the world that workplace bullying was talked about on a stage when we did that at London. And I think you probably came to me with the idea of doing it. But I'm so proud of that. I think it's really an epidemic that's along the lines of homophobia or racism or whatever, but nobody has kind of got to the point yet where they just say, this is totally unacceptable. It's swept under the carpet.
Right. And, I'm a woman too, and so I've tolerated behaviors over the years that I look back and say, wow, why did I tolerate that? Why did I laugh that off? Why did I look the other way? But that's the way we're socialized. That's what the psychologists have helped me understand, is that socialization that we experience when we're young, as women especially, we carry that with us straight up into adulthood. Unless they come across a Bonnie and a Lucy and Olympia who help us, our mentors. That's why, another subject I'm passionate about, you are too, is mentoring. I think Live, how many years is Live now? ExecSec Live?
7.
7 now. So relatively speaking, it's still pretty young.
Yes.
Right? You're still in single digits. So is BTUA. If we don't talk about the tough stuff at these kinds of events, Live and BTUA, where are we supposed to hear about it? That's
Absolutely.
how I feel about it.
And it is changing lives. I mean, the letters that we get after we do both of our events, from people saying, oh, just what a joy to be able to voice it.
Yeah. I think that's, my mother, Ruth Lowe, who we lost in 2009, she used to just say to me, Bonnie, just try to leave the world a little better than the way you found it. And I think this way of standing on a stage to talk about what's real is doing that. So
very definitely.
It's my way.
Very definitely.
I'm trying, and thank you for helping me do that.
I can't leave the interview without asking you how Vicky is.
Oh my gosh. Well, this woman who we began a 5-minute phone call as a business, relationship, has evolved into such a strong friendship. And of course, last year our lives were rocked when she got the diagnosis of stage 2 breast cancer. And we were together. We were in London. We heard about it from her. And she is cancer-free now. And she had prayer warriors all over the world. And you did the webathon and raised so much money. It was a team effort to get this girl healthy.
The world's assistance, it was extraordinary, actually. I know
It was amazing.
Kamisha Foley wrote a post that was called A Tsunami of Love, which I kind of picked up on that phrase and used it in an editor's letter later on. But I have never, ever been part of something like that, where everybody just came together and so totally wanted to support her.
Yeah. She, that's what life does sometimes, right? We get blindsided, and none of us knows. Like, none of us is guaranteed tomorrow. We live in such a crazy world, right? Like, things are happening all over the place, that when this happened to Vicky, everyone could relate to it, because it could be me. It could be me tomorrow.
Though. I mean, you two are such a partnership in everything that you do. To be out there on your own for a year must have been really tough.
Well, I wasn't alone.
No.
I had you, I had Robert, and Vicky and I were talking every day. And during that year, we still did B2A. She did it remotely. She did it via, we were streaming her in. That happened in New Zealand. And we discovered, Lucy, where there's a will, there's a way. Mm. What I get is that, I wrote an article that I'm pretty sure you published called 10 no-brainer reasons why women need to help other women to succeed.
Yeah.
And after getting to this age, what I know is that it's easy to be supportive of other people when things are going great. The real test for people, though, is when things go wrong. When there are health issues, when there's a controversy, when there's money problems, when I think the real test for us, especially as women, are what happens when the chips are down, when you're not the coolest kid on the block, or just when things are hard. And I wanted to be the very best friend I could be, so that I meant, calling every day, and Robert and I flying down and, going to chemo. Like, if that's what it's going to take. I just think we need to be there for each other when the chips are down.
It's a great lesson, actually, in why you need to build your network now and not when you need it. Because, look at that network that she'd built that kicked in. But you and Robert especially, I know were very much there for her.
Well, I think life throws these things at you. You've got good and bad happening all the time. There's such wonderful things that are happening. I mean, now with the internet, with ExecSec Live, Facebook group, and all the social media, at first with B2A and the work we were doing, it really did feel like we were climbing an icy, rocky, windy, steep mountain.
Yeah.
It felt like nobody knew what this was. It kind of felt like an alien thing. I started my life as a kid feeling like an alien, and here I was again, trying to make sense of this profession that it was obvious that it needed so much. And
it's gathering momentum, though, isn't it? I mean, there are suddenly...
Thanks to you.
Yes, I don't know about that. But what I do know is that there are trainers that are coming up through the ranks, and an amazing group of younger women that are being inspired by the people who were there initially, who are now wanting to drive it forward and to be educating a new generation. And with the number of assistants that there are in the world, there is enough work for all of us more. So, so important, I think.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time right now. I mean, I say this all the time, that I don't think there's ever been a better time to be an assistant than right now. But I also think there's never been a more complicated time. And it's only getting more so. And that's a huge deal. Like, on this interview, if there are leaders watching, to me, what I see all around the world, wherever we go, I know that this notion of supporting the administrative staff to get training, it can't stay a new idea. It's still a pretty new idea in a lot of companies in the world. And what I see is that the companies that are really being the most profitable and the most successful are the ones who are also that are investing in this amazing group of humans.
Absolutely.
And I think they're worth it.
So do I. So, finally, if there was somebody who was sitting there thinking, should I become a member of the administrative profession. What advice would you give them?
Understand that it's going to be about lifelong learning, and that this is a feeling that you'll know in your gut if it's meant for you. You know, every assistant on the planet, the thing that they all have in common is that they love that no 2 days are ever the same. If what anyone watching is looking for is, you know, to understand what every single day is going to be like from beginning to end, that's not this job anymore. 2018, it's a whole new ball game in the world and the workplace, and it's super exciting. I think it's a great profession, and there's huge money that can be made in it too. Huge money. But we've got some work to do with both the assistants and the leaders. Yeah, we've got a lot of potential here. It's exciting.
Bonnie Low-Kramen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy Brazier. You're amazing, and I'm so happy we're friends and living on the planet at the same time.